Yeah, hi, I'm Jesse Olive. I am a sales and marketing professional with about 25 years of experience, focused mostly in the small business sector. And over that time, I have worn a lot of hats. It's part of the nature of working in the small business arena. I have done everything from building websites, a lot of graphic design, logo design, some website management. I started a business doing that many years ago and taught myself search engine optimization, navigated into working. Most of that was agency side, owning my own business, and then moved client side and got more heavily involved in the digital marketing world and elevated my responsibilities to more executive level work, dealing more with strategic planning, project management. I've also done sales in there. And over that amount of time, I guess I have just made some discoveries and had some things that I've really wanted to get out there and share with people with the hopes that it would help other marketers, whether they are campaign managers, sales professionals, account managers, or even other business owners. And so this particular exercise, I'm going to talk a little bit about it before I get too far into it, but really is it's a couple of things. One, I have created a sort of a very generic example of a dashboard of a campaign. I'll talk about that, and that's down here. And then up here is really a projection tool built around existing metrics, if you will, and then some hypothetical variables as well, really revolving around spend. So I'll get into that. I mentioned that I have a lot of business working in the small business arena, and I want to kind of touch on something about that. Working in the small business arena, I have found has required me to exercise a lot of creative problem solving. It presents its own challenges, and a lot of times that has to do with efficiency. Not that large corporations aren't heavily focused on that, but when you are wearing multiple hats or you have fewer human resources, available, and for that matter, financial resources, efficiency becomes, let's just say, I don't want to say it's more important, but at the same time, there's less, there's less time to do everything that you're doing, right, or that your team has to do, and what they're trying to do. And so it's definitely the case in the small business world. I'll put it that way. And so, there's also hurdles that come with that. And when you're dealing with, marketing campaigns, a lot of small business owners have been burned, or they're new to the game. And so winning, the spin that you need to help them get where they want to go and be competitive in their industry landscape can be challenging, right? Because, there's not as much money there. That being said, that's, what I've found in working with small business owners. Yeah, sometimes companies don't have the capital, but a lot of times they have plenty. It's just a matter of winning their trust, right? So, up front, I think the sales effort it's extremely important to prepare the customer for the journey ahead. Some things that they could run into, right? So if you're selling someone a digital marketing campaign, for example, and they want to start out conservatively, I think it's important that they understand where their customers are at and where they're trying to go, and what it most likely is going to cost to get them there, and and really to explain to them that you're playing catch up. So while you're trying to get them from this point to this point, they're trying to get from this point to this point, right? So it may even cost them more than it costs the other company. and you got to be careful how you phrase that because you don't want to scare them away, of course. But at the same time, you got to be real with them, right? You've got to show them data. You need to do research on their customers, show them reports, point to the data. A lot of salespeople rely on salesmanship, which, of course, that's important. But at the same time, they don't have their brains really wrapped around how to, find and present the data that will help tell their story and really make their sales effort, easier and more successful, right? So that's what I try to do. I try to show customers where they're at currently, where their customers are currently, and then in the world of search marketing, which encompasses, Google AdWords or paid ads, basically, on the search engines and search engine optimization. What the available search market looks like, how many people are looking for specific keywords that are relative to what it is that they do, right? And so that gives them an idea of the potential, right? And then you show them where their competition is, and they know who their competition is. And if they see them doing it, it often makes them want to do it. And if they're talking to you, that psychology most likely is already there, but you have to be real with them, up front. And that's not to say you can't start them conservatively, but at the same time, that's what a lot of small businesses do. At the same time, they need to be prepared to come to the realization that conservative start, as far as spend goes, it's not enough, right? And so you got to be careful how you phrase that, but you need to prepare them for that. One thing that can help you also is referencing what I do with customers. I not only do that, I also reference the impact I've had on other businesses in my resume. I'll deal with, the objection that I don't have any experience in their industry. And I'll point out that pretty much at every stop that I've been in throughout my career, I've been in a new industry, right? And then the agency, the nature of being in an agency world requires people to be able to pivot quickly into new agency or into new industries and to be able to perform, and that's one of the talents that agencies have over, and they have different perspectives, right, that they can bring to the table that offer an advantage versus a disadvantage, right? So that's not to negate the importance of learning a customer's ins and outs and the nuances and things like that, especially if you're getting involved in the branding. But you can, I've inherited campaigns and actually manned them myself. I've had debates with people about outsourcing. I've outsourced here and here, and I'm like, yeah, but I've done all the work. I've done all the work and I've excelled, and I understand what's going on here. If I'm outsourcing, it's because I'm taking a more holistic approach to their business, and I know I can plug in other places and have people man specific tasks to get the job done. And I have sort of a short-term plan and a long-term plan for them. But regardless, when you look at my resume, you'll just see where a business was, regardless if I was doing the work or outsourcing, or usually a hybrid approach or not, where they were before and where they were after, right? So when you're selling this type of work, obviously you want to have some case studies. If you're actually representing an agency, make sure that you show them what you're doing for other customers, right? So there's, basically a few tips up front that are a little bit outside, what I want to discuss, but I felt worth injecting into this video. So I've described what these two tables are. Now, there's a couple things to consider here. And one is that, you'll see that in these tables, I have revenue figures, right? So this enabled to do what I'm talking about doing in both of these cases for both of these tables, which I'll explain in a minute. You got to know what the revenue is. And there's various levels of that sort of level of, there's various levels of that visibility, right? So what I mean by that is, so these figures. Actually, this exercise came from, because these are hypothetical figures. This exercise came from a scenario that I'll explain here in a little bit. When I was working with an e-commerce company, right? And they did a revenue attribution, but that was part of their system. It was a really cool feature for their software, and it attributed to specific campaigns. So that was very nice to have. The one thing that they were lacking was an actual deeper level of revenue attribution. And what I mean by that is, a website often will have a phone number where someone can call, and an e-commerce website, and someone will actually sell through that phone call, right? They'll actually have a salesperson on the call, and they'll go through the process that way. Sometimes the entire thing can happen through chat. Sometimes the entire thing can happen through lead forms. And whether or not they're actually closed at that point and a salesperson calls them, that lead was generated, or could have been generated, by your digital marketing campaigns. And so if you don't have attribution set up, revenue attribution, that points revenue to the first click, that first point that individual or individuals expressed interest in your products or services, or discovered your website or your brand or whatever. If you don't have things in place there, then you really don't know how well your digital marketing campaigns are doing, right? So that's why even you might say, well, what if it's a radio phone call? Well, you can implement revenue tracking systems that generate numbers that are only associated with your radio ads. And if someone hears an ad and calls that number, it goes right into that system. And then as long as you're tying as long as you're one way or the other, whether it's manually or you have a system integration that ties that deal to a specific amount of revenue, you just don't know. And that's how you can do that. So anyway, that being said, that's like an area that I hadn't experienced until I worked as a project manager for an e-commerce company. And I'll come back to that. But another scenario is where I only knew revenue. Now, we were in the process of implementing a revenue attribution system, but we were using open source software that didn't have built-in integration. So we had to hire a developer to build that integration and hook into their open APIs and collect the data that we needed. But that hadn't been generated yet. And over time, I was in a unique scenario where I had different levels of authority above me. So I had to follow whatever was being, the orders of whatever the orders were being handed down by whoever my superior was at the time, without necessarily knowing if that had a sign off from the chief executive officer of the parent company of these subsidiaries I was supporting. So during at least I would say a couple years, but I know a full year, we were running Google Ads campaigns, and I was being asked to increase the budget at times, to decrease it at times, et cetera. And eventually was asked to keep, just to keep the budget, the spend low until we had that attribution system in place. I then was promoted and was working under a new person who was a senior VP. And they basically asked me to create a strategic business plan. And they taught me, how to structure one of those, and asked me to brain dump everything that I had in my head that I felt we needed to do into the strategic business plan. One of which was putting the budget back, where it was at a much greater spend. And so, but of course, with the understanding that that strategic business plan would be reviewed and approved. So, but I didn't want to do that without any new findings, right? So I went to the CFO and worked with him to chart out, the monthly revenue. And we created a line graph of the previous year. And then I went back and created a line graph of the spend with Google Ads for that previous year, and then impose that line graph on the other line graph. And we had a couple of findings. One was there was a direct correlation. I mean, the two lines mirrored each other almost perfectly. The only difference was that we found was in the margins. And we found the more we spent, the greater the margins. And there's no way to really quantify that I could think of. No real way, not with the resources we had. And but at the same time, there's qualifiable ways to maybe explain why that would be happening, and that make plenty of sense. And at the end of the day, what I think is, just like in sales, you're supposed to, you can't rely on one sales call, right? So you can't necessarily rely on one impression or one click on an ad. And so I think part of that is because the larger the budget, the more times people will see that same ad. And so that increases your number of conversions. I think also there's things like simply sharing, more people see your ads, so that increases your word of mouth. They may send information to someone else. There's more chances that will happen. That's less likely than the former scenario, but we found that that's the case. And I've seen, that happen quite a bit in other campaigns that I've managed, where the performance of the campaigns, the margins of the, between the spend and the revenue are greater the more the spend is. Okay. And so that being said, so there's that scenario, this scenario, and then there's the scenario where you're tracking everything, and that's where you really want to be with an ROI attribution system. You want to have all of your campaigns, all of your marketing, as much as possible, basically paired with revenue. Okay. That's a completely different, without going too much further into that, would be a completely different video to produce. But going back to the e-commerce company. So the reason I came up with these, I'm going to start with this table down here. First of all was visibility. Okay. I was tasked pretty quickly to, so I was a project manager. I don't know if I'm repeating myself here, and if I am, I apologize, but I was a project manager for an e-commerce company. I was hired in. I had to learn, part of as much as I could about their software. And then I inherited clients pretty quickly. I had to learn their processes, their tools, all of that stuff, and then immediately turn around and train another person and onboard them. I contributed to improving the onboarding of their customers, and sort of, and then had to build relationships within, learn the campaigns, manage existing projects, which ended up being about 100 at a time, split between digital marketing projects and design projects, which wasn't too cumbersome. They were really process oriented, very organized and methodical with how they drove customers through a project. That almost was more of in that specific part of my role, more of a project coordinator, right? Because I wasn't involved up front in the sales process, which you typically want your project managers to be involved in that, so they make sure everything, all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. But that being said, that wasn't the case here. My job was to drive them through the project based on set processes, right? Which I also worked with them on improving and things like that. They also handed me a project where they managed their design and digital marketing projects in two different tools, Trello and Basecamp. And they wanted to sort of integrate everything into Monday, or implement everything into Monday. Integrate would work, I guess. Anyways, and I was, nominated to become certified in Monday and to take on that project. And the reason I'm telling you all this stuff is because I wanted to kind of preface basically, this use case scenario with the fact that, because I'm going to talk about some things that I struggled with and I didn't know right away because I was doing all of that out of the gate. So it wasn't until that was behind me that I was really able to say, okay, I've learned the nature of this role, and I know there's a need for an account manager on this side of things. They had account managers that supported people with software and the features and upsold and whatever, but that was a full-time job on its own because the software was so feature rich. I mean, it was really powerful, really flexible. There was a lot going on over there, and that's a completely different animal than digital marketing and creative services and all that sort of stuff. And really sort of a different mindset really required there. So anyways, I assumed that role. I was already the center point of communication between the customer and our team. And I spearheaded the design meetings and the digital marketing meetings where we onboarded clients onto these programs. And they reached out to me naturally because I was that person for answers to questions that they had along the way, right? So that being said, I inherited different types of different levels and types of campaigns. Some were new campaigns, some were just ongoing, right? So I was able to see a lot about the nature of these campaigns and what we were able to do. And the campaigns that we inherited, we had people doing some of them like upward near $500,000. I mean, this is mostly small businesses, $500,000 a month on just like one campaign, like a SEO campaign or a pay-per-click campaign. They were crushing it. And then we had these new customers that were that we had to navigate a lot of what I talked about earlier. Just the confidence, winning and keeping their confidence, winning additional budget, spend, and keeping them on the campaigns as we continued, right? So some of the latter I got right out of the gate, and so I was really just following steps at that point. I wasn't able, I didn't have the knowledge necessary really to come in and I don't even think the comfort level yet with with my with the team leaders for me to kind of start talking about digital marketing and the ins and outs, and they really let that up to the digital marketers. And so we were inheriting campaigns that I'm sorry, not inheriting campaigns. We were starting brand new campaigns that right out of the gate, they weren't necessarily, as far as we knew, from just e-commerce transactions, which is all I even thought to pay attention to at that point. As far as those were concerned, we were not operating in the black. We were in the red on some of them, right? Others were taken off and whatever. So they leaned on me a little bit, and my first reaction was go to, that scenario that I had spoken about previously, where I didn't have a revenue attribution system, but I was able to prove interacting with a high-level CFO, really talented guy, that the more you spend, the better your return on ad spend gets. And the more conversions, the better your conversion rates get, and things like that. I leaned on that a little bit to kind of qualify that first with my team, and then we tried that with the customers. Some of the customers pulled the plugs. It wasn't a lot; it's probably a handful of clients pulled the plug on the campaigns. Others switched to other campaigns and tried those things or whatever. But it wasn't until all this stuff was behind me that I was really able to let that thing that was nagging me come back to that and say, I want to have a better answer for people when we hit this scenario, because we had hired a new salesperson that was crushing the sales, sending us all these new, new accounts. And and I also knew that our digital marketing managers were doing so well with these other campaigns. I wanted to be able to bat better for them. So it wasn't really my role as a project manager, but I found myself doing that. So um, I, you know, I lucked out with one customer, and that really sort of affirmed the need for the company to either really suggest people implement their own ROI attribution systems, or to start offering that as their own service just to save their clients. She really, I had suggested that up front, but again, I had all this other stuff I was focused on, so I couldn't really drive that home. But this customer was already doing it. She was, it was one of the few companies that I was dealing with that actually had a marketing director. So she was actually running these ads and needed to alleviate herself of some of the work that she was manning, but she was already, attributing revenue to specific lead sources. So, or campaigns and campaign types, et cetera. So, with her, it was great because that was an example of one of those campaigns that looked like it was underperforming. And then I built a relationship with her and was able to navigate, her to identify that she was tracking revenue outside of just online transactions, and to prove that, that there was more revenue coming in from our campaigns. And then also to win her vote of confidence that, because she was splitting, I think, still her budget between some of her own campaigns and ours, for her to just fork over that entire budget. And so with all that being said, by the time we got all of that data, put into one of these, a table like this, it changed everything. And all of a sudden, we realized, okay, well, we're actually in the black, not in the red. So that was good. And that being said, this exercise would work well for both, a customer like that's, barely in the black or in the black, but they're wanting to do a lot more. Or again, a campaign where they're not quite there yet. Okay. But the first thing, that you want to have with someone like that is a dashboard, right? Where you actually have the most important information available to you quickly, okay, specific to that client. So really, when you're running ads, I mean, there's all these key performance indicators that you can discuss with clients, website visits, conversion rates, impression shares, cost per impression, cost per click. I mean, I could rack my brain for all that stuff, but that's not where my mind's at right now. I've done it, plenty of it. But really, honestly, I see agencies and digital marketers and campaign managers too often talking that type of stuff to stakeholders. They care about the money going in and how much is coming back to them. And so you can try to explain all that stuff, and if you're good at it, you can. But at the end of the day, that's a conversation that I think often I don't want to say it's a complete waste of time, but it often is. And if anything, it is sort of, if you're not talking this stuff to them, the high level stuff, right? Because if they wanted to know how it all works, I mean, some small business owners, they micromanage a little bit more. They're more interested in that sort of thing. They want to learn what's going on, but at the same time, they're outsourcing you for a reason. They're paying an agency or hiring you in-house for a reason. And if they are a business owner or a department head, they got a lot going on, so they need the high-level data pretty quickly. So you want to start out, and that's what I did with these customers. I built this dashboard, and this is all hypothetical data. This isn't real. But basically, I was able to come in. There was one client I saved that had an account that looked something like this, where they had reached a point where they were doing, 10,000, I don't know, much larger amount of revenue than the last month that they ran their campaign, and they contacted me, and they asked, why is their campaign not performing like it did at a certain point? And I explained to them, they dropped their spend. I was able to pull up their dashboard, quickly analyze the history of their campaign, their performance, the overall, what their campaign overall had done for them. So 43,000, hypothetically 200 in revenue, and profit 4,200, and then broken down into a month by the last 6 months. But it also allowed me to identify changes pretty quickly in anything, and that's what I did. This was a case like this where I noticed that they had dropped their spend. What this would be 25% or 75% at in their most recent month, and I actually this is a formula that basically, this figure is based on a formula that pulls from all of these figures. But in that case, their return on ad spend was higher. So their performance of the dollar was doing better, but but obviously their revenue was down because they were investing less. So they were like, hey, put it back where it was. And so we avoided some conflict there, and I was able to navigate that pretty quickly. But then I want to step further, right? Because of this nagging, the losses that we incurred with these new campaigns, and I just felt that our digital marketers and our company there was more to this story, and we needed to figure it out, and we needed to be able to tell it to future customers when we came across scenarios like that. And so I did a little digging, and I started looking at the return on ad spend initially. And I was noticing that these reports that we were submitting often it didn't report the return on investment, it reported the return on ad spend. And the return on ad spend almost always was over 100%. So that meant that, we were generating more revenue than they were spending and sending to Google. The problem is that they also had to pay us to do the work. Nobody's going to do this stuff for free. So there had to be a management fee. This is just a hypothetical management fee for demonstration purposes. But, so the margin between the spend and the revenue generated, and again, this was sans the digging into other conversion methods, but it just wasn't enough to cover the management fee. And so we needed to kind of be able to navigate that conversation. But what I realized was, okay, 35, I would take something like this. Okay, 135% return on ad spend. That's 35 cents for every dollar. So if you start multiplying that times a certain amount of money or a certain number of dollars, that can end up, that can end up to be quite a bit of money, right? Just depending on how many dollars, you're multiplying that towards. And the management fee is fixed. So that number can fluctuate, but at a certain point, there's a threshold where, if you're increasing the number of dollars, times whatever the over 100% amount is, that will at least cover the management fee. So I created this projection tool, if you will. And so the first thing I did was just map out all the things that were known about their highest performing month, which was always the previous month. Remember, these were campaigns that maybe were 2, 3, 4 months old. And we had demonstrated that, the return on ad spend was continuing to go up. The problem was it was still not at a point where it was covering their management fee. So they were adding up whatever their losses were over that time. And so what I did was take the previous month's data and plug that into this spreadsheet. Okay, so what we knew was really all of this. We knew how much they paid us. We knew how much they paid Google. we were tracking the revenue, at least with online transactions. And then we were able to, so that allowed us to calculate the return on ad spend, which is obviously the revenue divided by the spend. And then let's see here. And then the return on investment, which is the management fee and the spend, and divided by revenue, right? So that's more into the revenue, which is why your return is, and I know a lot of you already know this stuff, if not all of you, but this tool maybe not. So that's why there's a difference, how you can have a negative, anything under 100 is negative return on investment, but still have a positive return on ad spend. So I took all that and charted that out, right? And so these two obviously required me to create formulas up here, that basically processes those calculations. So the challenge is with the next line, you don't know what the revenue is. You pull in your constant, you know what your management fee is going to be, and but this is a projection, so you don't know what your revenue is. Like, that's not a hard figure yet. And then you don't know your return on investment yet. But what I did do was say, hey, look, we're not, even though I told you about what I've proven before in my experience with ads, and the more you spend, the greater the margin, the greater the return on ad spend, whatever, even though I've seen that happen time and time again, let's go conservative. Let's keep your return on ad spend the same. Let's just assume, since you've seen us improve your return on ad spend every month, let's just go with the best, we've done at this point, which was the previous month pretty much every time, and just assume we'll at least maintain that rate of return on your ad spend. So then we know that information, right? So once I was able to, once I considered that, and I went ahead and put that in as a figure, I was able to reverse engineer through formulas, how much the revenue would be, and then what the return on investment would be. So all this tool really then requires me to do is just plug in hypothetical figures, right? And so here you can see that it's not really the campaign, it's the investment. And so if you have prepared your customers in the sale, first of all, like I said, that a conservative budget, you may be coming back to them pretty quickly and asking for an additional spend. If you've already prepped them with that, and you're already proving that, hey, we have a trend already going, like you started out at 50, then we went 75, then we jumped to 135, but you're still not covering your threshold. We need to get you in the black. It's gonna cost about this much if we operate at least at the same return on ad spend or the same rate as we did the previous month. Prepping that client and showing them this figure and plugging in that information and allowing them to see this, it's a huge help, and it will. And I'm not saying it's going to work every time. Obviously, salesmanship comes into play here, but it's definitely going to be helpful in at least stating your case and proving that it's not your digital marketer that was the problem. It's not your agency that's the problem. And then you can combine that, like I said, with either if it's you that's doing the work, your track record that you've had working for pretty much, hopefully that's the case. Every company you've had this impact. It's where they were before they hired you. This is where they were after they hired you. These are the campaigns that you put in place, blah, 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 blah. You can state that case. If you have a client base and you have other accounts, you can state that. You can also bring back into the conversation, look at what your other customers are doing, and just be, you got to be careful how you phrase things, but be real with your customers. Let the data speak for itself, right? And then they know it's on them. I was mad at them or upset or frustrated or concerned, whatever their emotions were, thinking that it was them, but they just proved right there that if I were investing more, look, I'd be making money. We'd be going in the right direction. and I know my competition spends more, so I can't really blame them, and I don't want to start all over. And so, okay, right? That's one scenario. The other thing is, and I've done this. I did this with a plastic surgeon's business once, and it was all qualitative, not quantitative data. But I went in and basically took that whole approach with the sales. I think why I used competition's data. I showed her the potential in the search market, how many people in her city were actually looking for what it was that she offered, and she was able to sort of calculate in her own head, like, well, if I sell this many procedures, then, well, heck, then that's this much revenue, and there's that many people searching for them. And I also shared data with her about search engine optimization, that if you're in the top 65% around that of searchers for each keyword will at least click on your link within those search engine, the SERPs. And so you can, let's say it was 1,000 people. So then you can count on 650 people visiting your website. You just got to get there, but it's going to cost this much. This is where your competition is. This is what I've done in the past. That's all qualitative for the most part, right? Most of it. And so, well, it's a mix. But I wasn't able to say exactly like, okay, if you invest this much, this is what's going to happen. Okay. But this right here, this is a completely different, that's how you would hopefully sell them up front. But this is how you would keep them going. Now, the campaigns we had with her, which kind of helps with the segue into what I was about to talk about. She was, I think, investing about $6,000 a month in her current digital marketing efforts in year one. We took her to 16 the next year. Okay. But all of that approach that I took, it took her, once she saw the data, and I wasn't flashy or anything. I was professional, I was real. And I just pointed to the data. I just kind of made it clear in that presentation. Don't take it from me, take it from the data. She's a smart businesswoman. She had the resources. She decided, hey, you know what? Everything I need to hear, pretty much everything I can possibly hear, everything I'm going to hear has already been told to us. And I also looked at other providers' reports and was able to identify holes and like how she was being misled a little bit. So there was that stuff too, still qualitative. But basically I was able to show that what data we have suggests you should do this. You should invest in this. And then here's what it costs, right? And so she just went ahead and pulled the trigger and, took her digital marketing budget from 6 to 16. So here, same thing could happen. You could basically be dealing with someone that, a lot of business owners, they're going to make you prove yourself first. And they want to see, they already know what they want to see. They may be fully ready to spend more. They just need the data to tell them to, right? So that should at least win more spend, so you can retain the client and prove your campaigns, put them where you need to put them, get them the results they want to get while you improve the performance of your campaigns. And then it also could yield additional sales. For example, they may be exhausting their budget on a specific campaign around 4,000. You may have a few. This is a Google Ads campaign, so you may have already, you may be already exhausting people may not be clicking or using up that budget by clicking on the keywords in that campaign. So you may take them to a profit level of $4,000, but they could be someone that's like, hey, let's go ahead and invest in another campaign. Maybe that's another $500. It's an upsell. It could be another $1,000, whatever your management fee is, right? And and then you could kind of navigate that pricing with them and just basically use this same exercise to kind of demonstrate, okay, if your new campaigns perform at that level, then then this should be your return based on your new management fee, and then your new spend, et cetera, right? So it could help you sell yourself into additional campaigns, and they know, you just have to explain it to them that, obviously this figure might drop or this figure might drop, but they know they're headed in the right direction, and you've proven enough to them that you understand what's important to them with their business, and that you are actually effective at what it is you do. Again, pull all the other supporting information into the story, and this should help you. So long video, I know, but at the same time, I hope it was helpful. And if you would like to discuss this more or anything else related to business or marketing, hit me up. I love to talk shop.